Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about a big topic that's probably going to turn off most of you because we've been trained to be turned off by it. We're going to talk about how one of the biggest catalysts for change has actually been stolen from women. And if you're like, yeah, I have a really hard time standing up for myself or making things in my life be different, then keep listening because this is for you. So you might be like, what is this thing that's stolen from us? And it's anger. Anger is stolen from us. And it's stolen from us in a lot of ways. And I'm going to share that later in our episode. But first, what I want to name is that as I bring up anger, and perhaps you feeling angry, or me as a woman feeling angry, maybe take a moment and notice what you experience in your body. Chances are, if you're like most women, there's a sense of uneasiness, a sense of, oh no, you can't do this, right? Or maybe you even think, oh, Jen has an anger problem because I'm going to talk about anger, right? Or maybe you think you have an anger problem because you feel angry. And we're really going to unpack that because a lot of times as a therapist, I have women come in to see me in my private practice and they tell me that when I'm like, oh, what are you in for? What brings you in? They say, oh, I have an anger problem. And when I lean in and get curious, it's not actually an anger problem. It's that they have rightful anger and they're having a hard time setting and maintaining boundaries and being treated fairly. And so I want to talk about rightful anger today and just honor that you may be feeling uncomfortable, especially if you're Gen X or older, maybe even the millennials. I've noticed in my practice that the Gen Zers are a lot more comfortable with their anger. Not all, but a lot of them seem more comfortable. But if you're Gen X or older, for sure, anger was not something that was really encouraged or even allowed in us as girls and even as women. So I want to unpack this a little bit today and just say that it's valid if you're uncomfortable with this conversation, or maybe even feel shame about it if you're like, oh no, I'm angry, because that could be another experience too. And the thing is, we're going to talk about how anger is a natural emotion that's trying to help us in some way. So if you are experiencing anger, it makes sense. And I want to talk about rightful anger in women. So, as we talk about rightful anger, I just want to name that there's a lot of reasons for us to be angry, right? Plentiful reasons for us to be angry, whether it's the continued inequality or inequity in our workplaces, in our homes, at the doctor, in schools, in society at large. We as women have plenty of reasons to feel angry, validly angry. And I suspect I don't have to remind us about things like inequitable pay, with Equal Pay Day this year in 2024 for quote unquote all women, which is really white women, was May 12th of 2024 is Equal Pay Day. So if you're not familiar with Equal Pay Day in the United States, that is the day that women would have to work to make what men made in the prior year. But here's what's like insane to me and completely unacceptable. Yeah, March 12th for white women, but when you look at Black women, Equal Pay Day is July 9th. Equal Pay Day for moms is August 7th this year in 2024. Equal Pay Day for Latino women is October 3rd. And this is like just awful. Equal Pay Day for Indigenous women in the United States of America in 2024 is November 21st. So if you're Indigenous, y'all are having to work almost a completely full extra year to make what men would make, white men would make. And if you're not feeling angry about that, I gotta believe you found a way to suppress your anger because it's just not okay. And remember, anger is an emotion that basically is like, yoo-hoo, there's a violation here. Something needs to be done about this. And it's like a huge catalyst for change. It's what we need to experience and feel to be able to even see a need for change and to be able to assert ourselves. If you're feeling angry, I also suppose I don't have to tell you about a study that just came out of the UK recently that 30% of men admitted to doing a task poorly on purpose so that their wife would never ask them to do that again. Now, that's how many admitted. And lately, we've been terming that weaponized incompetence, right? I have a really hard time wrapping my brain around that one. It's, do you love your wife? Do you see how stressed she is? Just to get out of helping around the house, you're going to do it bad and put it on her? Anyway, I just have a really hard time with that one. I'm no longer partnered myself, but that one always astonishes me. I have a really hard time figuring out how that could even be okay and how we couldn't be angry about that. I suppose I also don't have to cite Maya Dunsbury's book, Doing Harm, the truth about how bad medicine and lazy science leaves women dismissed, misdiagnosed, and sick. That book, by the way, if you want to feel your anger, I will tell you, oh my gosh, it is rich with statistics and just lots of data on how women are not listened to or trusted when they talk about their bodies. But the other piece of it is that most medical research until even like through the 90s was done on men. There was even a study that she cites done on the impact estrogen has on heart disease, and they didn't have any women subjects in the study. That's insane, right? That was in the 90s, which, yeah, okay, 30 years ago, but for me, a Gen Xer, that feels like yesterday. That also feels insane to me. I can cite her. She says that often women's symptoms are brushed off as the result of depression, anxiety, or the all purpose favorite stress, and then goes on to talk about a lot of times our menstrual cycles can be blamed for medical problems we're having. Pregnant women or post pregnant women or perimenopausal or menopausal women. Like it's very, I don't want to say very rare, but it's less common to be taken seriously the first time. So it can take us years to get a right diagnosis, right? And so I'm not going to share like that whole book. This one really fires me up though, because as part of the medical community as a therapist, it disappoints me and angers me a lot. And if you're feeling pissed hearing about all this, that's valid. This stuff is maddening. And I'm trying to keep my voice relatively regulated so as not to dysregulate your nervous system. But oh my gosh, are you even kidding me? This stuff is nuts. It is just unacceptable. And I suspect if you're feeling pissed about it, you may have even come up with a different word like, yeah, that's frustrating, or oh, that's not okay, or yeah, that's annoying or irritating. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because anger has not been something women were allowed to have throughout our lives. And as girls, we were taught to find and talk about their close relatives. But the problem is when you suppress big feelings, they have a way of coming out either in bursts of anger, and then we get called a bitch, or in body symptoms, right? Like eventually chronic illness. Rosalind Wiseman, actually, in her book, Queen Bees and Wannabes, talks about the problems with relational aggression in girls in the school system because girls are not taught to express their anger and assertively handle conflict. That in a different book I'm reading, by age 5, already girls are trying to stymie their anger because we've been taught it's not okay. So then the impact of this is there's much more relational aggression that goes on throughout our school years and even into adulthood. There can be some really icky dynamics in our workplaces, all because we never figured out or were allowed to figure out or even given tools to figure out like one, it's okay to feel angry. Two, anger is a healthy emotion that tells you something's off and that you need to do something about it. And three, It's one that inspires us to be assertive and direct and communicate in strong ways that make change. And in her book, Rage Becomes Her, I forgot the author's name. I'll put it in the show notes. In that book, the author talks about how it's in the patriarchy's best interest that women don't have access to anger because the men in power know that when women are angry, that motivates us to advocate for change, to actually stand up for ourselves, to demand that things be different, to demand that things change. And so this has been very intentional to keep women down. If you think about it, even as recently as the 1950s and 60s, women really weren't working outside the home that much or even encouraged to as recently as then, in some cases, not allowed to. There's old commercials that over the last, I don't know, sometime in the last 20 years, I saw one and it was like basically an ad for how to learn how to be a good wife and make sure you have warm dinner on the table and you could bake cookies so that the smell of cookies welcomes your husband when he comes home from work so that he can enjoy the pleasant smell of home and make sure you touch up your makeup and put on a nice bow, right? I don't know about you, but to me, that says don't be angry. Don't be yourself, do everything for your husband. And clearly, this also centers heterosexual marriage as the only path, right, for women. And back then, in some ways, it probably was. Women could not have their own checking accounts or credit cards till right around my birthday, and I'm 50, which is crazy to me. And so when you think about that, anger was not safe for women because we couldn't work. If we expressed anger or dissatisfaction and our husband kicked us out, we were screwed as recently as the 50s and 60s. And I think a lot of women still feel that way, whether in the workplace, they're being mistreated. There's all kind of data on how women in the workplace carry additional emotional load because they're the ones that people come to when there's a problem, even if there's a supervisor, especially if the supervisor is a man. They tend to go to the women in the office to get support, and that takes time away from work women can be doing. It's not that we don't want to help our coworkers, but when it happens often enough, it takes away time from the work we can do to get ourselves promoted. Also, women in the workplace are way more likely to have to do the party planning and take the meeting notes and things like that. And a lot of times there just isn't space for us to express our anger because we're afraid of getting fired in those situations. I work with a lot of women who want to speak up at work, but there's a big fear about being fired. Even recently, someone who is being pretty severely sexually harassed was afraid to report it out of fear of retaliation and up to losing her job, right? And so we have every right to be angry and come by it honestly that even discussing anger makes us feel uncomfortable. That perhaps we don't know how to express anger. Perhaps we're scared of it, even. And I want to talk about this because the problem is, of course, if we don't experience our anger, then we don't get that little signal from inside that's maybe big signal inside that says, yoo-hoo, this shit isn't okay. No, absolutely not. Something needs to be done here. If that never happens, then we just go along and stay small and just do what everyone else needs. And a lot of times that can lead to depression and anger being turned inside and coming up in the forms of chronic health conditions. I think I don't have to say that chronic health conditions, especially like autoimmune disorders, disproportionately affect women. And I would be shocked if this doesn't play a significant role. I don't have data on that. We do know that from a study that's cited in The Body Keeps the Score, that incest, which now we call sexual abuse, but sexual abuse increases the chances of an autoimmune condition in adulthood. And it has to do with the RA-RO ratios. So if you're a doctor or a sciencey person, those ratios are off so that now instead of the body attacking outside when it sees threat, it attacks the body itself, its own body, your own body. And then that creates that is an autoimmune condition, whichever one, right? And I will tell you, as a trauma therapist who sees only women, I didn't know any or few autoimmune conditions. Like I knew MS and lupus, but I knew very few until I started focusing only on women and women with trauma histories. Now I could probably list off five and most of the symptoms to the point where when I spot them, I'm able to refer people to the doctor. Not because I can't diagnose that, it's out of my scope, but my point is it's that common. And this is something Gabor Mate talks about, or Gabor Mate, I think I say his name incorrectly, in his book, When the Body Says No, is that he was working with women and they had all these like seemingly obscure chronic conditions and autoimmune disease and things like that. And he's, what is going on? And so he listened. He actually tuned in and listened, and he heard that a lot of them had trauma in their histories. And I got to tell you, I bet he also heard that a lot of them had suppressed anger. First of all, when you're being traumatized, it's probably not safe to be like, this isn't okay, right? Or at least your nervous system doesn't think it is, right? So we know that us stuffing our feelings isn't healthy and can lead to more medical problems. And we also know that not being able to express our anger and be assertive can also lead to more medical problems because at the doctor, we might not be taken seriously as quickly because we're women. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we can do about this. So I've really unpacked the problem. I've unpacked how we are rightfully angry, right? We are rightfully angry. And I'm not even talking about additional rightful anger that Black people have or Indigenous people have, really anyone of color has, right? About racism and, the systemic ways that they have been mistreated. But as women, we have also been systemically mistreated in different ways. I'm not here to compare. I'm not into comparative suffering. And it's true. We also have been, in some ways, systemically not allowed to do things that we could do if we were men, right? There were a lot of mixed messages. So now I want to talk about what to do about it. Because if anger is a valid emotion, then it's something that we need to feel and experience. And especially if not feeling it and experiencing it leads to chronic health issues potentially, as well as being less likely to be promoted and paid and be able to make change in the world, right? To be clear, I'm not blaming us women or we women for the lack of change. We have not been allowed to express our anger, and that has been what got in the way. But now we can choose to find ways to do that. I do want to start by saying if you're in a domestically violent situation, if you are in a risky work situation where there is a good chance if you expressed your outrage, you really would get fired, that you really want to assess for psychological safety to be able to express anger or see even if there's another way to do it, especially if you're in a domestically violent situation. This may not be for you right now. I just want to honor that. I would love you to be able to do this, but I would recommend that you have the support of a professional where you have access. Well, I'm a professional, but where you have one-to-one support from a mental health professional so they can guide you through those kind of tricky situations. In general, what needs to happen, in my opinion, as a mental health therapist and an ADHD coach, is that first of all, we need to start noticing that we're angry. We need to stop minimizing our anger by saying we're a little frustrated or we're a bit annoyed or irritated. And that is or can be very hard. And I'm not suggesting you have to post it on Facebook or say it to everyone like, I'm angry. Although I've gotten in the practice. And what I found is when I tell women that I'm feeling angry, they're like, me too. Right. I had the recent experience in my IFS level 2 training where we checked in the morning because we practice on each other. So we want to have a little dipstick as to how everyone's doing. And I had experienced some really toxic masculinity around that time. And I was feeling pissed as heck. No, pissed as hell. Let's be honest. I was so mad. I was just like, oh my gosh. So when it came to my turn, I was like, I'm angry. I'm actually pissed as hell. Like I'm angry. And I was like, and I feel uncomfortable saying it because I'm afraid I'm going to turn all you off and make you not want to talk to me, but I'm feeling angry. And so you can hear in that I even was trying to justify it to them or protect them from angry woman, right? Which is a bigger problem. I know Black women particularly get called the angry Black woman, which is supposed to be this bad thing, which I actually like angry Black women. And yeah, sometimes they're angry at me because I'm white and do something stupid or something I don't know yet is not okay. And I'm working on figuring that out. But I actually appreciate that anger because there's clarity in, oh, okay, good to know. So what I will say though is I was like trying to protect people from a woman being angry. My God. And what happened was beautiful. In that group of IFS therapists who are all at the same training, most of the women, because I talked about why I was angry with the toxic masculinity and in my own situation, but just also with a lot of clients struggling with their partners doing the whole weaponized incompetence thing, among other things. And I was feeling really frustrated. I explained that, and almost everyone in the group unmuted and was like, yep, same, same, same. And it was actually through that I was told to read the book Rage Becomes Her because it's super validating and it feels supportive in a way that allows us to actually work with this feeling. But the first thing we have to do, maybe not even talking about it with someone, is admit it to ourselves. That might be hard because you might not know what anger actually feels like anymore if you've been stuffing it or minimizing it into something like, I feel grumpy, or which is fine. Like, I'm not judging anyone who does that. I know I've certainly done it, but see if you can start to notice, oh, what does anger feel like in your body? See if you can notice, what does anger feel like in your body? And then when you're feeling angry, see if you can accurately name, yeah, I'm feeling angry. Perhaps sort through, what am I feeling angry about? And see if you can sit with that anger for a bit. And if you're new to being with anger, you might only be able to do it for a few seconds. It might be overwhelming. So just pace yourself as you step into this if anger is something that you've suppressed completely for a very long time. Then you want to validate it and be like, of course I'm angry about that. Of course I'm angry that I have to remind my spouse to take out the garbage, his one chore. And then he treats me like I'm a nag because I have to remind him. Of course you feel angry about that. And see if you can validate it. And you might need to sit with it. Might need to experience the anger. And eventually, after you've worked through the anger, you can figure out, what do I need to do? What is this anger telling me I need right now? I'm not trying to get us all divorced and suggest you immediately leave your husband, to be clear. But it might be that you're like, oh, hey, I need us to sit down and have a really frank conversation about equity in our home and having a household of teamwork, right? It could be at work, finding a way. And I'm not suggesting you have to go in guns a-blazing, telling your supervisor, I'm angry because blah, 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 blah. Although I've certainly done that before. I was lucky that it was well received. Um, although I was told I could work on my diplomacy skills. So there's that, which I have my own opinions about, but okay, that's fine. But there are ways to say, I'm feeling angry about this. And here's some ideas about what I would like to see happen. Or here's what I feel angry about. Here's what's not okay for me. Set the boundary, what's okay, what's not okay. And here's what I'd like to see instead. Or I'm open to having a conversation about how we can shift this, right? I found that even like lately, if I'm on a service call, with someone, like I recently had, oh my gosh, major challenges with a company who is installed my garage door last June and just, oh my gosh, told the wrong information. And my car was locked in my garage because the garage door was slanted and stuck closed. So I really needed it fixed quickly. And it was just one like they said, oh yeah, someone will come out tomorrow. No one came out tomorrow. And so it was just like one thing after another. It should be under warranty. Oh, it's not under warranty. Like all this stuff. And I was feeling really angry. And in those situations, they get you on the phone. They're like, "Oh, hi, this is so and so. How are you doing?" And I say, "Actually, I'm feeling pretty angry and frustrated. And I'm not angry at you, to be clear. I'm hoping you can help me though, because I'm feeling really angry about this situation." And I actually find that works fine because I'm owning my anger. I'm not putting it on them because this customer service rep, it's not their fault. A lot of times sometimes it's just a bigger policy that companies have, and then the employees are stuck enforcing it, right? But I'm not suggesting we go off on people or we give them a piece of our mind. I actually don't think that's okay. I actually think that's what happens when we suppress our anger. I'm not suggesting that we don't have our moments, right? Where if you've asked your kids two or three times to do something and they haven't, it's only naturally you're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I told you to do this," right? That's a natural response. And I will tell you, even as a trained therapist with my nieces, there have been times when I was in charge of them for a weekend, especially because I'm not used to being around kids because I don't have any of my own, even though I'm good with them. I would ask them to stop fighting with each other. Which they usually don't do in front of me. I remember this specifically though. We were in the kitchen and they were fighting with each other. I was like, "Okay, ladies, I need us to figure out, I need you to start working on a solution," right? I was letting them work it out for a while. And I was like, then one of them hit the other one. I was like, "Okay, that's enough." And didn't handle it well. And then they kept going with each other. And then I did raise my voice. So I was like, "That's it." And I'm a therapist. I could have handled this more effectively, but I was frustrated and angry. I don't like them hitting each other like that. I love them both. And to be fair, they don't do that often, much less often than my sister and I used to do when we were young. But again, so much of what's going on. And to be clear, I wasn't suppressing their anger. I just wanted them to not hurt each other. So to be clear, but it's something to be mindful of though, right? What messages are we sending the girls in our lives about if it's okay to be angry? Because feeling angry is okay, right? It's just that most often we want to try and work with our anger instead of spewing it out at others. We want to use our anger as a catalyst for change to motivate us to action. That doesn't mean we never raise our voice. There are times where we're going to be like, "Listen, this is not okay." That's true. It's just that we also want to take responsibility for our anger and work through it. So I hope this helps. This is a big topic. I don't expect this is something we're going to solve in a 30-minute podcast. Um, at the same time, felt it was important to speak to because I hear from so many women in my therapy practice, especially, but also in my coaching work, about how angry they feel about all of the inequity in their homes, at work, in society, at the doctor, at school. And we're getting tired of it. We're getting tired of it, especially because we're seeing men who are supposedly in charge. I would just call them politicians versus leaders. So we're seeing politicians who are supposed to be leading but aren't, like, not using anger in healthy ways, instead using it toxically. And that can be incredibly frustrating and angering for the rest of us to watch, especially women, because it's, "Oh my gosh, they accuse us of being out of control when we're angry." But like we exhibit rightful anger or rightful rage, and you think we're the ones who are emotional? Okay. And again, there's just so much suppression of emotion that happens that contributes to this. So, my hope for you is that maybe you even just start paying attention to notice when you're feeling anger and at least name it for yourself and validate it, even if you're not quite yet ready to act on it. You could even keep like an anger journal just to write down, "I feel angry about this and I want this to happen." And perhaps you might be able to articulate the changes you want to see, or perhaps you might need more one to one assistance with doing that. I would encourage you to seek out a mental health professional to help you do that. When I say mental health professional, to be clear, I'm not saying you have a mental illness, but a therapist usually is someone who can help with that. You don't have to actually have a mental illness to be seen by a therapist. You do need to be diagnosed to have your insurance be billed. That's a whole nother topic. They can diagnose you with an adjustment disorder, which basically means that life is hard right now. So, anyway, all right. It's great to have you all here. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're not following yet, be sure to follow and please check me out on Instagram. My Instagram handle is ridiculous. It's in the show notes. It's I am Jen Barnes, Barnes, like Barnes and Noble, but an underscore between each word. All right. I'll see you next time. Take care.